tea lovers, settle in because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose. And today we're bringing you the tea.
Across eras.
Today's episode covers the death of an incarcerated man. Trigger warnings include mental health issues, substance abuse and addiction issues, police corruption and cover-up, and other potentially upsetting topics. Please use discretion when listening.
Hey, how's your week going?
It's really good. I took this whole week off from work.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Time off needs to exist more.
It's just been fairly busy and, I want to chill out a little bit.
Speaking of, I know this is ridiculous, but we finally got our air conditioning on. There's just been a couple of obstacles, and it is luxury.
Oh, yes. I don't have refrigerated air.
This is my first place with refrigerated air.
If you think that's wild, well, so New Mexico is, different types of desert. And there was a time, and this time is approximately, I would say 30 plus years ago, that people didn't feel like they needed even any sort of air conditioning in their homes out here.
I didn't grow up with it at all. We had nothing like that in the house. We had a heater and we had fans.
We always had fans, but when I lived here when I was little, we had a swamp cooler. And then in Hawaii, we had like a window unit. And then in Alabama, we had like refrigerated, central air.
I think anywhere that is that humid, it's just necessary.
Yes.
I used to die visiting my parents in DC.
Yeah.
It would just because, summer is when time off was a bit easier and just, oh man, I was not built for it.
It's rough. But New Mexico never used to get that hot or have very much humidity at all. The humidity that we do have is weird because sometimes it will be like 30-40% humidity. And again, if you're from a humid place, that's not humid to you at all. But when you live out here, it is.
That just feels
And
awful.
it's just enough humidity to make your swamp cooler not work.
Yep.
You just get medium tepid air being blown in at you. Refrigerated air was on my list of non-negotiables when I went house shopping, but it finally comes down to like dishwasher or dishwasher hookup. That was a non-negotiable. I'm not doing dishes. What do you think I am? I had to have that. I needed 2 bathrooms. I wanted a yard. I wanted certain things.
Yep.
And so my house, I don't have a swamp cooler, but I have a master cool, which I am under the impression is like one step up from a swamp cooler.
So I know we are usually like, I don't know, a little bouncier of topic, but that's not exclusive. We're not necessarily just doing whimsical crap every day. And a lot of the things that we talk about really matter to us, even the funny, weird ones. And so sometimes the stuff that matters to you becomes a little bit more serious.
Yeah, that's what's happening today.
Right.
And it's incredibly serendipitous timing because this morning, like literally today as we're recording, this morning I sat down to double check my references and everything. Because guys, I'm not an investigative journalist. You're
an interested party.
Exactly. I use like 85 kajillion sources. And once I figure out how to make our website update again, I don't know what's happening. Hopefully by the time you hear this, it'll be updated.
Small technical difficulties.
Right. It'll all be on there. And there's even a couple of podcasts I'll talk about that cover this way more in depth. But I'm sitting down, I'm checking my sources, and my bestie from the state of Alabama, high school bestie, sends me a text message that a person involved in what I'm going to tell you about today just got arrested.
It's wild timing.
Finally.
Because you've been planning this episode for a good bit.
Yeah, I used this whole thing for a presentation in my ethics class in my grad program, which I'll put a link to that in the sources section. It's got a lot more like salacious details in it. Okay, so you ready? Thursday, January 26, 2023. Around 4 a.m., the weather in Walker County, Alabama was cold. It was about 66 degrees Fahrenheit and around 64% humidity. And like we were just saying, humidity is brutal. It's also brutal in the cold.
Yes.
If you've ever been in cool, extremely humid weather, that thick, wet air just crawls into your bones.
Right, and it crawls into your clothes, and you're just constantly damp.
Yep, there is a damp coldness. I probably wore a coat more often in Alabama than I ever have out here.
I slept under my coat in England, like a
Oh,
good
I
couple
believe
of times
that.
when the heater was on the fritz, and that just it was like the fog was crawling in.
Horrible. That Thursday, the 26th, would be the last day on Earth for Anthony Mitchell. Anthony went by Tony, so that's what we're going to call him. Tony was 33 years old, and he was not doing well. Tony lived with his dad in Carbon Hill, which is a small town in Walker County, Alabama. But his dad had died at the end of August the previous year, and Tony had already really suffered from a substance use disorder. Now we've got the way meth was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now we have fentanyl. And it did seem like at the time when it was all going on, like meth really took a grip in small towns
Yes.
and rural areas. I remember one time driving up to Colorado, going through Farmington. On the outskirts of Farmington, they had these horrible billboards of meth teeth.
Yes, I remember those.
Oh, man. So my first year of college, and I went to college in the state of Alabama, we went to a house party, and I was like, I don't remember. It wasn't in our college town. It was like in a town outside of it, very rural. And I remember somebody was like, it might have been the host of the party, which is, ugh. But somebody was like using, I don't know, their license or something to like cut powder into lines. And being a person who had not seen that, I kind of just assumed it was cocaine. Thank you, Sweet Valley High books.
Right.
Regina,
Sometimes that's just
the deaf girl who dated Bruce. They get upset. She goes to a party. She tries cocaine once. She drops dead. That was really impactful for me. Anyways, I had no clue. And then people were like passing the plate around and snorting it. And my friend who I was with, she was like, let's go outside. Like the people outside, at least they're just drinking. Like, a little weird.
Like, let's just not.
Right? Well, later I did hear someone say it was meth. And I was like, I guess I didn't know you could like snort meth. Maybe I thought you just like were supposed to smoke it.
I think
I
all I've
had
ever
no
seen
idea.
was like the references to like the bubbles things. When you stay really far from a thing, you're not going to be as well versed in the details of usage, I guess.
Right.
It's not actually something that I personally encountered a whole lot, even in college.
Right. And that was the only time I ever am aware that I encountered it.
Yeah. I don't think
It's
that
very
it was
strange.
It was definitely like already a problem and already really prevalent when we were both in college, but just situationally, I didn't run into a ton of people that were into it, and I was definitely not.
Yeah, I didn't either, especially in Alabama. I really didn't. And honestly, the host of this party, if I recall correctly, they were, I was young. I started college when I was 17. I didn't turn 18 until October.
No, hey, I graduated at 17, just,
Yeah, same, yeah. But the hosts, they were a little older, but like, they weren't married and didn't have kids, so they were able to attend college when they decided to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the only time I ever recall seeing it. Like, I'm not saying I ran with a great group of people all the time, because some of my friends were super partiers, but that was more like drinking.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And some people would get really high. That wasn't my jam. But a lot of people, small rural towns, they drink. Just what you do. And so, yeah, this is clearly a long time ago and not the point. So the point is that Tony was already struggling with his addiction issues well before the death of his father, but this made it a lot worse.
Grief will bring it out,
right?
More than anything.
Right. So backing up, we're going to back up 2 weeks to January 12th. January 12th, 2023, Tony shows up at his cousin Steven's house. Tony's cousin, Steven, he had not seen Tony since the previous August when he was at the graveside service for Tony's dad. And, Tony was a tall man. He's over 6 feet tall. I believe his mom said he weighed like 240 pounds. And when his cousin saw him, he didn't realize at the time, he knew he had lost some weight, but he had lost over 100
Oh,
pounds.
wow.
Yeah. I'm not really going to go too deep into anything besides what I know to be factual in this part because I am not qualified to talk to anyone about mental health. I am a medicated person. I believe in better living through science. Whatever you
Absolutely.
believe in, that's on you.
No, I agree. Better living through chemistry.
Well, this is off topic, but yesterday my brother was like, we were at lunch and he's like, oh, who uses like ChatGPT? And it was just me, him, and my kid. And so he tells us to pull it up and type in, based on every conversation that we've had, tell me 4 or 5 brutal truths about myself. And I use mine mostly for work. And with work, I go, please rewrite this email to be courteous and professional, things like that. For school, when I'm like, this is what I want to talk about, these are my sources, I don't know where to start, like I need an outline, or when I need to come up with a funny title, sometimes for these episodes. And I will say that's just me. Rose doesn't use AI.
I don't. The sole concession that I've made is for the artworks for each of our episodes.
We pay for that. I mean, not an artist, but at least we
Right.
pay for it.
We're paying for the service that creates it, but also I'll admit it's a little bit of a laziness issue on my part. I think that if I could reasonably dedicate more time to things, I would take a run at us designing them.
Oh, you totally could.
But
Not I.
I do not, yeah, we barely get the edits out, and so like I have to make that concession. And it's not that I hate AI. Well, okay, yes. Ideologically, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I text people, the robot's gonna freaking kill you.
At least she hasn't said that verbally in a meeting where our boss is like, guys, why aren't you using your AI to proofread your emails?
Never have, never will. All right, I spent way too much time, way too much effort, and way too much money to learn how to write, to let the robot take my job. They're coming for my job.
I know. And as a creative writer, I stay out of young adult author social media space because it's really toxic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
love
hold on,
all of you who I just said that about, but you know it's true. They're
When people you love are dramatic, it doesn't mean you love them less.
right. I really don't actually know who they are. I just try not to insult anyone. But I just see like this blip that goes by my face, something about like some young adult author, I guess in their book, they had accidentally left their ChatGPT prompt. That's kind of lame.
That's pretty crass. And don't call yourself an author if you're doing that.
You know what though? Is it the same? Is this the new version of a ghostwriter?
The writing that I have different feelings about that than I do with the art. Like writing, at least it's like it's extrapolating based on information that you're feeding it.
Right.
But artistic AI has been trained from the beginning without copyright on the backs of actual artists and then pricing them out of the market. That I have a huge problem with, which is why I'm so conflicted about our artwork. So I mean, if you have comments, I'm very into it. I don't see it changing soon, and I acknowledge that it's a little
we
bit
don't
of
make any
hypocrisy
money
on
off
my
this.
part.
How are we supposed to hire?
Yeah, right. The real life job calls because people keep insisting on money for goods and services. It's just obscene. Anyway.
Right. So the point of all of this is that one of the things it told me was that I'm intellectually ambitious but suspicious of institutions.
I just wonder where I got that impression.
Right? I thought that was so funny. Anyways, let me get back to this. Tony tells his cousin he needs help because his older brother, who was stillborn, and that part is true, I believe in 1984, which was before Tony was born, his parents did have a baby who was stillborn, unfortunately. But Tony says to his cousin, the baby who is stillborn is in a box behind a wall in the attic. Tony says, I need you to help me get that box out because there's 2 portals in the house, a portal to heaven and a portal to hell, and I need to get the box into the portal to heaven so that the baby basically will, go to heaven and be with my dad. I think
he's
was
fixated on it.
Yes.
Yeah, he needs to help, and that's
yes. So
psychotic break looks like.
Yeah. So his cousin and his cousin's adult son, I believe, they're like, something's definitely wrong. So they go back with him to the house. They go into the attic. There's no portals. The wall that Tony wants them to help him break through is actually like an exterior wall. And so they can't convince him that it's not happening, but he's not like actively trying to do it on his own. And so they are like, we got to get him some help.
Yeah.
So they run back to the phone and try to call the sheriff's office, get no answer. So he finally calls 911 and he's like, can you come out and like, I need someone to check on my cousin. Like he needs a wellness check.
Yeah.
Something's going on. So officers with the Walker County Sheriff's Department arrive, and at some point, like anyone available in the area goes out, because after the sheriff's department show up, they state that Tony's in the yard, sees them, shoots at them, and then takes off into the woods behind his house. So by the time the cousin gets back, and I don't know if Tony's mom is with the cousin at this point, or if she was just alerted and came over separately, or maybe she was already on her way, because she would come and check on him. She brought him food, and she paid the water and electricity bills in the house.
Right. There's people keeping an eye out, and it's a small town. Like,
Yeah.
she's definitely getting informed.
Yeah. So SWAT shows up. They're like, we're in the area doing a training exercise. And they have this like short scuffle, and the Walker County Sheriff's Department is able to get Tony, and they're like, okay, we're going to place you under arrest right now for attempted murder because you shot at us, firearms crimes, meth possession. And then the public information officer from Walker County Sheriff's Department, his name's TJ Armstrong, he tells the family, according to them, okay, we're going to keep him for a little bit. We'll set his bail high enough so he can't bail. He'll detox, and then he'll be able to get a mental health evaluation. Okay?
That's fair.
Except it may have been said in this particular phrase, which if you Google this phrase, you'll find a lot of people reporting on this. We're going to detox him and see how much of his brain is left.
Oh. Wow.
Immediately, while at the scene, Armstrong, who is the public information officer, uses his cell phone to snap a picture of an officer handcuffing Tony and puts it on their Facebook page.
Just front and center without any kind of having processed him yet or anything.
Now, several things here. First, Tony's face in this picture is covered in like, they said it was black spray paint. However, the cousin was like, what? No. And people more familiar with flash bombs have stated, no, that's what happens when you use a flashbang. I don't really know what they're called.
Oh, the flashbang.
Flashbang in close proximity to someone or in an enclosed space. So, and this is just me completely speculating and literally making this up off the top of my head. So, like, if Tony's chilling in his living room waiting for his cousin to get back, which it probably wasn't that easy, and they decide to toss a flashbang into his living room. But I'm also, as you will get to see, very biased in this situation. So the photo and the Facebook posts really surprised people, not just the people like in the area who follow the Walker County Sheriff's Office on Facebook,
Right.
but like, you know, his family. And also, Walker County Sheriff's Department has a rather large social media following.
Ugh.
Not for good reasons.
Oh.
We'll talk about them in a little bit.
Fair enough.
This is why I am biased. But later in the day, the sheriff's office edits that post so that Tony's face is cropped out. That's nice, I guess.
Blame the social media intern and move on.
So 14 days later, or jumping back to January 26th, at 4 a.m., officers stated that they found Tony unresponsive in his cell. At 6 a.m., a sleeping mat, was placed in Tony's cell. It's kind of random.
Did he not have one before?
Right? We'll talk about that. Tony was still in there. And then at 8:55 a.m., officers carried Tony by his jail-issued clothing to a police SUV, put him in the backseat, and drove him to Walker Baptist Medical Center. TJ Armstrong, public information officer, contacts the family, and he's like, guys, Tony has maybe the worst case of addiction I've ever seen. We had a really difficult time with him in jail.
But we did stop and post his picture on Facebook for you first. Sorry.
Yeah, that did happen in the beginning, right? That's not okay. So much stuff happened on their social media. That's why this is going to be at least a 2-part episode.
Yeah, no, we will be continuing this. Just heads up.
And again, I'm not an investigative journalist. I'm an interested party because this is not acceptable. So he tells them Tony's body temperature started dropping throughout the night. We get him to the hospital as soon as we can. When we get to the hospital, he like sits up when the doctor speaks to him and then collapses with a heart attack. Like, you need to get in there and see him and say goodbye. And so after 3 hours of attempting life-saving measures on Tony, he was pronounced dead at the hospital at 1:15 p.m.
Mm.
And like, period. If that was the whole story, if that was exactly what happened, hint, it is not. It's still a sad story.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, small towns and addiction issues,
Mm-hmm.
and Walker County has even more of a problem, but it's because they used to be a like textile and coal mining town.
Oh,
Everybody
company
either
towns.
worked in the factory or worked in the mines. And there were about 5 or 6 pharmacies in the town that brought in millions of opioids.
Mm-hmm.
Millions. These are people who, if you prescribe them an opioid, to which the company making the opioid is saying it's not addictive.
And I think people forget that. Like in the
Yeah.
beginning, when these things were coming out, the selling point was that it's not addictive.
Right. And so you're the doctor, right? And this person who works in the coal mines has come in and he's like, I really injured my back. I am like the provider in my family. I can't not work. I have to go back to work. And so the doctor's like, well, these opioids, they're not addicting, but like it's not going to really help with your healing process, but you'll work through it because you won't feel it.
And really, that's all that you're looking to get to at that point. Like, can I function?
Right. So Walker County, like many other counties in this country, were flooded with millions and millions of pain pills in the 2000s. Addiction rates soared. And then, of course, when opioids are not easily available, people move on to other drugs. Spoiler, they were addicting. And spoiler, opioid companies knew that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's not what this episode's about. I'm just giving you the backstory.
Mm.
So in Alabama, the state has decided against expanded Medicaid. They said that it costs too much and then everyone's going to have to pay higher taxes and they're going to complain. Unfortunately, that means someone with substance abuse disorder
You're on your own.
is on his own.
Yeah.
They're probably not holding down a job that offers them great health care.
Yep.
So in Alabama, if you are arrested for drug and addiction related crimes, then if you plead guilty, you can sometimes get placed in an addiction diversion program. So it's 18 months. You get drug tested multiple times. There's mandatory classes and regular check-ins with counselors and social workers. Does that sound good?
Seems like a step in the right direction.
Right? Right.
If it's used correctly, which is always the caveat.
Unfortunately, the state offers no assistance to help pay for that. So if you go into there, you have to pay $100 for an assessment, $75 a month for your monthly report, and then $35 for every drug test.
You're pricing people out of even justice.
Right. And churches have tried to help. I will say in rural South, religion is big, and the churches, I think they try to do what they can. They're just not qualified. They might not have qualified counselors and specialists who can work on these things because the resources aren't there.
Mm-hmm. And it often does a lot more damage for somebody with good intentions to try than nothing at all. And that's not, it's not always a culpability situation. It's just how that functions.
There's a church recovery program. I'm not going to name it because I don't know anything about them except for what I've heard, and it wasn't good. So, back in my hometown, there's a lot of addicts, and a friend of mine has a kid in their family whose parents are addicts. So, like, not great. And they both tried to attend this program, but it kind of just became like, well, you went there because the other addicts are there, so that's where you're going to get your drugs.
Your new connections, and yeah.
And that specific thing is not a knock on this particular program. It's just something that can happen. So that's why I'm not naming.
Right.
There's no shame. It just is what it is. So with an addiction issue, if you plead guilty or not guilty, if you can pay this or not pay this, you're probably going to get out eventually. But most people with addiction issues statistically end up being incarcerated multiple times. And in Walker County, being an inmate for 1 year cost the state about $15,000. I don't know how much it would have cost to give them expanded Medicaid. So, like, again, on the surface, Tony's death is still really sad, but if you're just looking at all the surface things, it's not implausible. We've got drugs, we have guns, and I mean, you know how small town, rural areas are? Like, there's probably like 4 guns per person per household.
Yeah.
And that's saying something because, like, maybe we had 2 in my household, but the average was
You were the
still
weirdo.
way higher. Yeah. So there's a lot of things involved, right? Except if there's one thing I know about the Walker County Sheriff's Department is that they are consistently corrupt and problematic. And I'm not saying it allegedly because there's been quite a few guilty pleas since this has happened, okay? So, Tony's death certificate was obtained by USA Today, and it says that he died as a result of hypothermia as well as, quote, sepsis resulting from infections and injuries obtained during incarceration and medical neglect. The ER doctor who treated Tony that day wrote in his records the following: I am not sure what circumstances the patient was held in incarceration, but it is difficult to understand a rectal temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 degrees Celsius, while someone is incarcerated in jail. The cause of his hypothermia is not clear. It is possible he had an underlying medical condition resulting in hypothermia. I do not know if he could have been exposed to a cold environment. I do believe that hypothermia was the ultimate cause of his death. So again, yeah, it's winter, but this is Alabama. This is not
indoors.
an outdoor prison in Siberia.
Right, you're indoors. I mean, that's 72 degrees, and that's internal temperature. That's not environmental temperature.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be a solid 98.
Yeah.
All right, that's insane. And they had to have left him for so long in between crisis and care for that to happen.
Yeah. Within one day, rumors were flying. Like flying. Because remember, the public information officer said he sat up and responded to us and then had a heart attack. So the one rumor that is still reported as fact, and to be honest, I don't know if it's been completely disproven or not. The biggest rumor was Tony was put in a restraint chair and put in the fridge, the walk-in fridge in the jail the night before. So was that punishment? Was he doing something and he was being punished? You know what? It doesn't matter because punishments are handed down by judges, not cops, not sheriffs, not me, not you. He had mental health issues and he supposedly shot at them. But like, what is happening? So TJ Armstrong, Public Information Officer for Walker County Sheriff's Department, releases a statement that turned out to be a lie. Tony was not alert and well when he left the jail for routine medical treatment. That was right before he had his heart attack. He also, in this statement, said that Tony had refused to speak while in jail, refused to eat, refused a mental health evaluation, and thrown his own feces at jail personnel.
He was also having a psychotic break and needed the mental assessment, probably
Right.
sooner rather than later.
Even worse rumors start flying. People are saying that they have a surveillance video from inside the jail. So there is a podcast out there called Secrets True Crime. I started listening to it because the first season was looking into the disappearance of a woman and her son from I'm telling you all this, so now you're going to know, from the town I grew up in, Slapout, Alabama.
Which I'd never heard of till we met.
No, nobody's heard of it, right? So of course I'm going to listen to that podcast. And then in season 2, she covered a situation that happened in Walker County with the sheriff's department. So she, prior to all of this, had a strained relationship with the sheriff's department, right?
Mm-hmm. Doing your research, you're actually talking to people. And...
Right. Amber's the reason I know about this case.
Mm-hmm.
When this happened, she jumped on it. And go listen to her if you're at all interested, because this is where the majority of my knowledge, interests, and sources are from. Thank you, Amber. Between January 28th and the 31st, people start swearing up and down that they've seen this video. Like it's being passed around people's phones.
So it actually exists out in the public.
Yeah. And then on February 9th, local news station CBS 42 puts up a news article stating they have seen the video. They stated, while the video they saw was just over 1 minute long, and in it, quote, Anthony Tony Mitchell was being carried into the loading area of the Walker County Jail. Mitchell is limp, his head and feet dangling as uniformed personnel, sheriff emblazoned on one of their vests, lay his body just outside a marked police SUV. In total, 4 uniformed officers then worked to put him into the police vehicle. But they did not publish the video at that time. So Amber, host of Secrets True Crime, unbeknownst to us, her audience, or anyone else, including people at the Walker County Sheriff's Department, has already seen the video. And Amber comments on CBS 42's Facebook link to the article and just says, "Where's the video?"
Why wouldn't you publish it? This is extremely relevant.
Minutes later, TJ Armstrong private messages her and says, quote, "I'd be interested in seeing the video too, LOL. I'd love to see a video of inmate Anthony Mitchell being unconscious."
Sarcastic.
And sidebar here, season 2 of the podcast, Amber's podcast, focused on the unsolved murder of a man named Eric Cates and his dog Gypsy. During season 2, Amber records it in real time, so you're witnessing the absolute disintegration of the relationship that she had in the very beginning with the Walker County Sheriff's Department.
Got a front row seat.
Right. But she stated in her episode about Anthony Tony Mitchell that TJ Armstrong always remained polite and cordial with her, even though her boss wasn't. And in that instant, she realized he was lying.
How do you deal with that then? You
Right?
have an actual above board relationship, and it's just like now this is turned into movie territory.
Right. And she goes into more detail with it, but he calls her right up. And she says, when she's telling us this, there's been plenty of times when he said, "This is off the record." And she goes, "But today, knowing that he was lying to me, I recorded him."
Nothing's off the record.
Nope. And he basically goes on and on about this. And he's like, "Hey, I can't believe anyone would say this." And she's like, "Well, aren't you guys fully video surveilled?" And he was like, "Yeah, but if there's a video and I haven't seen it, if there is, they can't release that. That's impeding an active investigation." Enter Corrections Officer Karen Kelly. She has worked the night shift at the jail for about half of the nights that Tony was held there. And according to the notes that she had, Tony, quote, "was denied basic care available to all inmates when entering the jail, despite showing signs of mental and medical distress. He was kept in a cell with only a drain in the floor and was housed mostly naked, without a mat or a blanket." Remember the mat from earlier?
Oh my God.
"Left to lie on a cold, bare cement floor." There's more to that too. Kelly says that she did tell this to her immediate supervisor. She didn't tell anyone else because the culture at the jail and fear of retaliation.
You run it up the chain to your supervisor, and what goes after that is none of your concern.
She was concerned enough to release the video.
Oh.
And then she got fired.
Yeah.
Her termination letter was signed by elected official Sheriff Nick Smith that said, quote, "She had engaged in certain activities that have been discussed with you, which are considered unsatisfactory service for a variety of reasons." The Walker County Sheriff's Department also tried issuing a search warrant on the phone of another officer at another police station, saying, "We heard they have it on their phone." Luckily, whoever was in charge of that station told them to GTFO because the methods they used to try to get that search warrant were very sketchy. Again, much more detail on Amber's podcast. We have so much to talk about. Karen Kelly also obviously filed a lawsuit alleging that she was fired in retaliation. And in that lawsuit, it said that TJ Armstrong had that video on his phone 2 full days before the news article said they'd seen it. So everything he was saying to Amber was a lie, and not just like a, hey, we can't talk about this right now. Like, I know what it looks like, but it's actually something else.
Right. Not
You
even
need
just
to
an
trust me.
explanation without
Yeah, you
details.
need to trust me. Hold off on this for 3 weeks. Let us finish our investigation.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
Privacy during an investigation is completely reasonable, but just straight up lying in a public servant is not.
Right? So that cell that Tony was held in, it's called BK5, aka it's the drunk tank. And he was held there the entire 14 days.
Whoa.
That is not where you go to stay.
No.
That's where you go to get sober. It has no toilet, no sink, no chair, no bed. It has a singular floor drain, which might explain why he was throwing his own feces, but what do I know? Also, they said they were following suicide watch protocols, and Tony was supposedly given a paper cloth to wear. However, it's already come out that he was naked and kept naked and next to naked and basically paraded naked through the holding area multiple times during his stay. On his third day of being incarcerated, Tony was dragged out of his cell and ended up being tased. Unfortunately, due to past drug use, you might lose your teeth. So Tony wore dentures, and being tased knocked them out of his mouth. But instead of giving them back to him so you could, eat, they just, sealed them up in a bag as evidence. Remember, he also doesn't have a sink, so he has no water, no food, no water. He's on suicide watch in a place where he can't have, utensils, so I don't know what his food is. There were also points where Tony was covered in his own feces because there was no toilet.
It's not like you have a place to wash.
Right. In the video, when Tony is being removed from his cell, there are moments when you can see officers sweeping garbage out of the cell. So a human being who needs mental health care instead is arrested and sleeping naked on a cold concrete floor surrounded by poop and trash. And the cell Tony was in was known to be, quote, notoriously cold during the winter months, and the temperature on the bare concrete floor was even colder. So maybe Tony wasn't put in the fridge.
His cell was a fridge.
His cell was a fridge. So you can watch the video if you want. It's on our sources page, and now there's multiple pieces of the video. So I am going to describe some of this. So again, listen with caution. In this leaked surveillance video, we can see an officer open the door to BK5, look in for a minute, and then shut the door. He then chats outside it's like a lobby area. I don't know what it is. I'll call it a lobby. So he chats in the lobby area with two other officers, one man and one woman, and then he and the man go back into Tony's cell. The woman enters another cell next to Tony's. The other officer, the man, leaves Tony's cell, comes back with a wheelchair, and then they attempt to wheelchair out a very lethargic Tony. But Tony is not sitting in this chair. He is falling out. He's also, at this point, someone has put him in an orange inmate jumpsuit. Another officer, a third officer, not the woman, comes up to them, and it looks like he's shackling Tony's ankles together. And in the video, Tony, if you don't look too closely, it looks like he might be talking to them. But if you look closer and then paired with what coroner said later, these are like involuntary jerking movements that happen. And then suddenly the three officers lift Tony out of the wheelchair by his clothes and yeet him back into BK5. As they're closing the door, you can see his feet just in the cell. The officers then unlock the door next to Tony's cell where that woman officer went in, and a lady in pink who looks like she's handcuffed comes out of that cell, followed by the first woman. Two more women, employees, officers appear, and one of the male officers starts then sweeping the trash from outside of Tony's cell. The woman in pink leaves, the women officers leave, and then we're back to I think the three first male officers. The door to BK5 is still closed. They stand around talking to each other for a while, probably should we call an ambulance now? Or should we emergency rush him to the hospital? They didn't do any of that. Another dude joins the conversation. Someone walks off. They go back behind a desk and hang out for a while. And then finally, three of them go back into BK5, carry Tony out by his clothes, and put him in the cell next door. Another video shows the door being opened from the inside of, like, I guess the garage area of the jail, where they have SUVs, and one of them is labeled prisoner transport vehicle. Like, transporting them, not in the event of a medical emergency, but whatever.
I mean, if I believe an official vehicle being
Yeah.
faster, like that's
Yeah.
legit.
And I will say, when I lived in Alabama, ambulance services could take a while. So 2 officers carry Tony in. They're carrying him by his clothing still. He looks unresponsive. They put him on the ground. His head falls back against the ground. Pick him up again, and then he's kind of shoved and manipulated into the back seat of the SUV. When they arrived at the hospital, doctors later reported that he never sat up. There was no heart attack. Now, today, the person who was elected twice now to run the Walker County Sheriff's Department, Nick Smith, was arrested. Guys, there's so much more to come, but I just want to end today's episode with this. Jail is a place to keep a person accused of a crime in a secure location until they have their trial and they receive their judgment from the judge. Prison itself is not supposed to actually be cruel and unusual. I know there are circumstances in everyone's life where they wish something was. But at the end of the day, everyone in this country, we all have the same rights. Plus, I know this is a very tricky, touchy subject, but drug addiction is a mental health disorder. That is a provable fact. If I break my leg, Rose is not going to say, mind over matter, just keep walking, it's going to get better. You don't tell an addict, just don't do it. And if you don't understand what that means, you're lucky. But I also want you to think about this. Are you addicted to your phone? Because I am. We all are.
Yes. I'm sitting here thinking about all the dumb things I read right before I fell asleep last night, and then the odd dreams that resulted.
It's wild because Rose is not a big cell phone user. She's not a person who's mindless scrolling. She doesn't have social media. I
would still consider it a problem in my life, and I am a mindless scroller in certain areas.
Right. And isn't that wild? So tell me how easy it is for you to break your phone addiction.
For however hard it is for you to not check a notification when you hear it.
Right. And
it's exponentially harder when that bell going off is physically affecting you, is actually changing your brain chemistry.
It really is.
How much worse is that?
It gives you dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want your whole entire life to be judged by the worst thing you've ever done, by the worst way you ever behaved? Whether you did it intentionally and you own it with your whole chest, or if it's that thing that keeps you up at 3 a.m. I'm just saying you don't deserve to be treated that way. That is not the sheriff's job. You're not the punisher. So that's what I have for you today. I know it's a really different, heavy subject. We're not a true crime podcast.
But we do believe in interdisciplinarity of research. This is a great example.
So if you listen to this episode, thank you. Let us know your thoughts, because there's so much more to tell you.
And we will catch you with the other half of the story next time. But thank you so much for listening.
Like and subscribe and tell your friends, please.